witches and magical folk. Today, it is finally time to talk about Discworld. I'm so excited. We're going to talk about the magic system in Discworld, or systems, but we're mostly going to focus on one. So I'm really excited to get into it because I love Discworld. So let's get started. Now, if you're not familiar with Discworld, it is by Terry Pratchett, who was an amazing author. He died in 2015, unfortunately, but left behind a huge body of works. If you're not familiar with Discworld, you might be familiar with Good Omens, which he co-wrote with Neil Gaiman, but he has a huge body of work, and a lot of it is in the Discworld universe. So today we're going to talk about The Witches, which is like a sub-series of Discworld. It is wonderful. It is wonderful. So there are 6 Witches books, as you can tell. And they start with the very third Discworld book, Equal Rites. Now, Discworld, there are different ways that you can read the series. You can read in publication order, or you can read by sub-series. So this is all The Witches sub-series, and this is in order, if you're wondering. But you can start with the publication order, which the first one is Color of Magic. This is the first Witches book. It was third Discworld book entirely, but he wrote them all, like all the sub-series, in very random order for the sub-series. So you'll get different suggestions on how to read Discworld. Personally, I read sub-series in order instead of the publication order. So in Discworld, there are a few different magic systems, and we're going to talk a little about the wizards in this, but that's not the focus of this video. This video is about the witches, but we do start with Equal Rites, which kind of blends both of them together. So in Discworld, there is a very binary system about magic. The males are wizards, the females are witches. That is, unfortunate. In these books, non-binary people and transgender people aren't brought up. They're not discussed. So I don't know how that would be handled in this universe. Unfortunately, that is a note I wanted to make. But this magic system is very binary. Aside from the first Witches novel, we just blow that completely away. So this book, the title is a pun, Equal Rites. It is about this girl who is born as a wizard. There is this whole ritual where wizards pass on their power when they know they're going to die to a newborn baby. Traditionally, the 7th son of a 7th son. And in the very beginning of this book, this wizard who's about to die goes to a house where a 7th son of a 7th son is about to be born and passes on his power, and a girl is born. So she is born with wizard magic, but she goes under the tutelage of a witch, Granny Weatherwax, who we see throughout the series, because girls aren't wizards. But she has wizard magic, which kind of works fundamentally different than witch magic. And she grows up like very kind of confused about her magic, because the things that Granny Weatherwax does are not how it works for her. So eventually they go and bring her to the College of Wizards, and the wizards don't admit her because she's a girl. And there's just whole shenanigans about getting her into the college. So right from the very beginning, we do kind of bust that binary magic system. The next 2 books, also in addition to Granny, feature Nanny Ogg and Magrat Garlic, who together form a coven of 3 witches, the Mother, Maiden, Crone. And then by the end of the series, we have another witch come in named Agnes Knit. Each witch has kind of her own different form of approaching her magic, but overall the magic is very natural. It's very nature based. A lot of what they do is not actually magic, which is kind of the point. They do a lot of stuff that people perceive as magic, but really they're just, working with their knowledge of the world. But that's not to say that they don't do magic. Granny Weatherwax often does what she calls borrowing, which she basically borrows the mind of animals and rides along with them. Magrat, who's the youngest witch, is often kind of lovingly ridiculed by the other two witches, especially lovingly as they go along. But she's kind of ridiculed by the other witches because she puts her value in things like crystals, occult jewelry. She's learned a lot from books, whereas Granny and Nanny, who are both older, have learned a lot just through life and doing things. So she's definitely often the odd one out because she puts a lot of worth into these magical objects. And one of the things I like about the book is that while she's given a lot of grief from the other witches who do things very differently, we do see her do magic, and she even at one point throws away her magical objects, all of her magical belongings, and then bad things happen to her and she starts really not being able to do things and questioning her worth. So I like that there's definitely an emphasis on you don't need all that stuff, but they can be tools for you. So I really, I like that touch. It is different from the wizard form of magic, which tends to be more science-based and universe, about the universe and everything. So it's very different because it's nature. It's very village witch type of magic. They are the midwives. They are the people who help people pass over into death. Granny Weatherwax encounters death, the figure of death, quite a few times throughout the novels. Actually, Death has a whole sub-series, which, of course, I also recommend reading. But they're very close to just daily life of the people that they work with. They make potions. Often the potions do nothing other than are a placebo, but they help people regardless by doing other things. Just the people of the village think that it's the magic that's doing stuff. But they do potions, actual legit potions as well. They just don't rely on that. And I really like how the magic works because it is very ambient. It's very worked into their daily life, but they don't rely on it on their daily life. Granny Weatherwax practices this thing called headology. It is basically a lot of reverse psychology and just getting to know how a person's thoughts work and using that to her advantage. And it doesn't sound like magic, but it is her form of magic. When Granny is trying to teach Esk, the other main character of Equal Rites, the wizard witch child, they have this wonderful exchange. Good, you're learning. But it's not magic. Granny sat down at the kitchen table. Most magic isn't, she said. It's just knowing the right herbs and learning to watch the weather and finding out the ways of animals. And the ways of people, too. That's all it is? Said Esk, horrified. All? It's a pretty big all, said Granny. But no, it isn't all. There's other stuff. That just sums up how Granny's magic works. She even uses it to use that against other witches. There's a point in Witches Abroad where she doesn't believe in this puppet that another witch is using against her, but the other witch believes in that puppet. So she uses that, and she uses that power of headology to use that against the other witch. One of the things that I really love about these books is that they're really, really insightful about magic. I think they're the most true to real life witchcraft that you will find in books. Or at least if there are other fantasy books that are more real life magic, I haven't found any. But I really love these because of that. It's just so different from typical fantasy books that have magic, but it's like super out there and it's not so subtle. Like being able to light fires and being able to call down lightning. There's nothing really like that in their daily life. They can do that. They just don't. So I really appreciate that they just like live really close to nature. They live in small villages close to nature, but they can use all these different powers of the elements. They like know the magic of the forest. There's a book all about fairies called Lords and Ladies, and they understand how to work against the fairies that are trying to take over, and they understand all that, all the folklore. They understand about the iron, and they use it all for their advantage. There are a few passages in Lords and Ladies about what magic is in this universe, and I wanted to read them because it very much sums up how magic works in this universe. And it treats every single version with respect, and they're all valid in this universe. What is magic? There's the wizard's explanation, which comes in two forms, depending on the age of the wizard. Older wizards talk about candles, circles, planets, stars, bananas, chants, runes, and the importance of having at least 4 good meals a day. Younger wizards, particularly the pale ones who spend most of their time in the high-energy magic building, chatter at length about fluxes in the morphic nature of the universe, the essentially impermanent quality of even the most apparent rigid time-space framework, the implausibility of reality, and so on. What this means is that they have got hold of something hot and are grappling the physics as they go along. And then later we get, what is magic? Then there is the witch's explanation, which comes in 2 forms depending on the age of the witch. Older witches hardly put words to it at all, but may suspect in their hearts that the universe really doesn't know what the hell is going on and consists of a zillion, trillion, billion possibilities, and could become any one of them if a trained mind, rigid with quantum certainty, was inserted in the crack and twisted. That, if you really had to make someone's hat explode, all you needed to do was twist into that universe where a large number of hat molecules all decide at the same time to bounce off in different directions. Younger witches, on the other hand, talk about it all the time and believe it involves crystals, mystic forces, and dancing about without your drawers on. Everyone may be right, all at the same time. That's the thing about quantum. And I just love that he put those different forms in and all are valid. As I said, wizards have their own form of magic, and that is explored in another sub-series that will be a whole other video. There is also another sub-series called the Tiffany Aiken series that is a young adult series in Discworld, and that deals with a lot of the fairy folk, but in a different way than we see them in Lords and Ladies. In Lords and Ladies, they're referred to as the fairy folk. They're also referred to as elves in this book. Elves are like a part of the fairy folk in this universe. The Tiffany Aiken books will be another video as well. I actually have not finished reading those, so they'll be down the line. But what I have read, I've really loved, of course. They deal with the more mischievous side of fairies rather than the really terrible side of fairies. So now that we've covered the magic in these books, let's talk a little about the books themselves. and a little bit of a review. As you can tell, I really love this series. I have read it a few times now, this sub-series. I love it for the writing, for the stories, but one of the other things I love is that they are parodies. I love them. Not so much Equal Rites, but the rest of them. There's the Wyrd Sisters, which is a parody of Hamlet. We have Witches Abroad, which is just a parody of so many fairy tales just blended into one. Lords and Ladies is Midsummer Night's Dream. Masquerade is Phantom of the Opera. And Carpe Jugulum is just a parody of vampire novels. Really, like, classic vampire novels like Dracula. They're all great, and the literature nerd in me, especially the literature nerd that studied Shakespeare for many classes. I took so many Shakespeare classes in college, and especially Midsummer Night's Dream is my favorite Shakespeare play. I appreciate them so much. You will laugh a ton when you are reading these books. Here's an example of an exchange in Equal Rites. All right. Anyway, I've got things to do. Wizards to bury. You know how it is. Smith took a spade from beside the back door and hesitated. Granny. What? Do you know how wizards like to be buried? Yes. Well, how? Granny Weatherwax paused at the bottom of the stairs. Reluctantly. Granny had nothing against fortune-telling, provided it was done badly by people with no talent for it. It was a different matter if people who ought to know better did it, though. She considered that the future was a frail enough thing at best, and if people looked at it hard, they changed it. There's a lot of loving, fun, poking at witch stereotypes, like Granny is upset that she has really nice teeth and clear skin, and she cannot grow a wart for the life of her, and she eats candy and sweets all the time and no teeth fall out. They also have, like I mentioned, they have a coven of the maiden Mother Crone, but they also always comment on how it's not really necessary, but it works out for them. But that's not a hard and fast rule, which I appreciate, because I feel like there are no hard and fast rules in magic, and I feel like Granny and Nanny would agree. Granny is the crone of the group, and she is a no-nonsense, get-it-done kind of figure. On the other hand, Nanny loves to have fun. She drinks all the time. She flirts all the time. She has a whole brood of children and grandchildren and daughters-in-law and just a whole clan. And she's she's always been very promiscuous, and that is also never just frowned upon. That's how she is, and I love it. Nagra is still finding her footing, and she, like I said, puts a lot of value into magical objects because she doubts herself a lot, and I feel like a lot of young witches can identify with both her and Agnes, who comes in later in the series, about just learning who they are as witches. They all have different strengths and different weaknesses even though, like, Granny doesn't let on that she has weaknesses, she definitely does, and we see a lot of that in her internal monologue throughout the books, especially the later books. Another note I wanted to mention on the series, later in the books, Agnes Nick comes in as a character, and she is a big girl, and that is commented on a lot of the time, but it's never really in a mean way, which I appreciate when there are characters with larger builds. She doesn't like it. She doesn't like her body, but nobody else in the narrative never look down on her for it, and it is even seen as a strength sometimes, especially in Carpe Jugulum. I do think it's not handled perfectly, but I think it's handled pretty well. I do wish there was at least one more book where we got to see more of Agnes and where we got to see her find her footing and find her confidence, but there's no more Discworld to be written, unfortunately. But by the end of Carpe Jugulum, she does start on that path, and we get the feeling that she's going to get there. So overall, this series does have a couple faults, like the very binary magic system, although, like I said, that is already disregarded in the first book, but throughout the rest of the book, it still is very established in this universe. But overall, they're super entertaining and a really, really good depiction of real-world magic while still having that fantasy element. And I love them, and if you haven't read them, I think you should really check them out. Start with Equal Rites and then make your way down. This is an overall reading guide for the Discworld series. Yes, there are a lot, but as you can see, they're organized by sub-series and the order that you can read each sub-series in and how they connect with each other. So I really recommend this reading order. If you don't want to read them in publication order, you can start with the first of any sub-series. My favorite sub-series are obviously the Witches books, but also the Death novels. So I super recommend each of those. That's it for my little review on the Witches series of Discworld. I hope you pick them up and enjoy them. Let me know if you've read them or if you do read them. And I'll be back later with another series to review. I have a lot. I don't know what I'm going to talk about next, but I'm sure I will find something that I love and can't wait to talk about. If you enjoyed this video, I would really, really appreciate a like and a comment. They go such a long way in helping support this channel and helping it grow. And if you really like what you see here, I upload lots of witchy content, some spells, some tarot unboxing, some just miscellaneous content, a lot of crafting. So if you want to see more of that and more books, a lot of books, feel free to subscribe, and I would love to see you here again. As a note, I have finally returned to streaming on Twitch, and I am doing tarot readings about once a week right now. I'm aiming for sometime Sunday, Monday, or Tuesday in the evenings US time, but right now I don't have a schedule. But I am doing tarot, and I'm back to my love of streaming, so definitely go check me out there if you want a tarot reading or you just want to vibe with some chill tunes. All my links are down below in the description, so you can check me out elsewhere. Have a wonderful, magical day.